you please introduce yourself?
Benjamin Bolanos, 9th grade teacher, also 12th grade teacher here at Palo Alto High School.
So can you give us some information about your background, like where you grew up, where you came from, and how you became a teacher?
Yeah, I grew up both my parents are pretty well educated. I don't even use the label Latino or Hispanic, just Spanish speaking. My mom's a sociologist. My dad's a theologian. So pretty educated background. We grew up on the East Coast, Jersey, Pennsylvania area on the border, depending which if it was middle school, elementary, or high school in that area. But most of my sister's still out there. I grew up definitely in a family structure where education was key, and that it was focused on quite a bit. I learned not only my native language but also English, and that was pretty important. My mom was very, disciplined, and she was on me for a lot of different things. So was my dad on homework and test grades. And I was a student in class, and she would talk to my teachers, and that was pretty key. She knew how to. She made phone calls, and not email, but phone calls was something to do. So yeah, she was really supportive in that sense, I think that shaped me a lot, quite a bit. I definitely didn't feel like I fit in a lot of times in like high school. I was sort of the outlier in terms of ethnicity and academic achievement. Like I didn't see a lot of people in my culture that were doing quite well, right, academically. I was one of the few, so I felt definitely like an outsider. So that's going to other questions too. Like that definitely drove me to be a better student, because the stereotype was that you're not a good student if you're in this part of if you fit this ethnicity or label. And I definitely did not want to fit that label. So I think that drove me to be a better student and outperform other students. That was my goal. Because in that sense, like you don't want to, because any kind of mistake you make, it's like you're labeled even more. Oh, of course you made that mistake, because that's part of your culture, right? It's expected, right? And I didn't want that. I was like, no. And of course I made mistakes, right? It's like you're not perfect, but I think that was that type of culture I grew up in, and I mean we definitely had a lot of fun too. But I think it was important that I went to college, and master's, and I think my mom wanted me to be a doctor, PhD in something, which I did not do. I didn't want to do that, but that was hard for my family.
What impact do you think education has really had on your life?
Oh, it opens up a lot of different avenues. A lot of paths. It definitely affects who you marry. It affects how you see the world. I think it affects. You're much more of a critical thinker. You're much more of a well-rounded person. I think you're able to there's a lot of educated people that not do this, but I think you're able not to put things into categories and sort of analyze things as they are. I'm sort of the type of person that I don't really take, when we talk about culture, I think I'm much more able to be more reflective about my own culture, but actually not make generalizations of it, because everything's different, right? And I think it's important to analyze and actually think through stuff, and not make judgments that are, just completely, well, how do you know that's true or not? And I'm the kind of person I question everything. I don't take things as truth. I don't, I think when somebody says, something, I say, oh, and when they say, well, that can't be done, I was like, well, how do you know? So I think that's the value of education, right? Like you learn to question things and don't take things as so, or as they should be, right? Things can change. So yeah, I think that's the value of education.
You mentioned that thing about people expecting to make mistakes.
Right.
So can you think of any other specific things that your culture affected the way you learn?
Yeah, I definitely think that when we talk about kids have an advantage when they come into schools having a shared experience, because if you have a shared experience, you can figure things out, you can apply things quickly. So for example, if, at least for me, if there's colloquialism, right? There's different sayings that every culture has, and there's American language colloquialism, right? And so if a teacher's making some type of analogy, right, to better connect to the kids, but you don't have that experience, like I don't know what that means, right? For example, up a creek without a paddle, right, or something, right? That's like common, right? Everybody hears it, and you say it. Well, it's kind of like hearing up a creek without a paddle. I'm like, I don't know what that means. What does that mean, right? Things like that, and I think that's kind of where, since I grew up in a bilingual family, a lot of my experience was both, right? And there's certain things that I come into the classroom, I don't know that word, right? I don't know that vocabulary word, because I was bilingual, right? And so I knew the word in Spanish, but sometimes, this is early on too. This is when I was like 8 or 9 or 10. But that also made me, I think I better learn that. I don't know that word. Everybody else knows it. I better learn it, figure out my own. So things like that, vocabulary was huge, or particular sayings that are pretty common. That I think definitely made me feel, I don't know that, so I must be not part of this group or whatever. That's kind of what works. And I think it has a huge effect on education in the classroom, because I think we say a lot of things in the classroom that for some kids, I totally did not get that, even though you didn't intend it, right?
You're a teacher now.
Yeah.
So you have the unique opportunity of being on this side and on the other side.
Right.
So as a teacher, do you still see the same things in your students that you described?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely still see the same things. I see things as I see the identity issue is huge. Not being able to fit in, not knowing the culture really well, or for a lot of kids that live in East Palo Alto, or their families speak no English, and this is their way of life, right? And they come here, and it's high stakes, and it's definitely culture shock, right? And so I can resonate with that, because I've been through that at an earlier age, right? By the time I got to high school, I think I've kind of figured things out, and there were some still struggles there too, but I think identity, I think fitting in, I think what their structure is at home definitely affects who they are as people in the classroom. That's huge. Yeah.
Did your friend group have a really large impact on,
Yeah, I had a pretty diverse group of friends. I did not have many Latino friends, only because there weren't too many Latino friends. It's just the way it was, right? So I made friends with, I had Caucasian friends, I had some Asian friends, I had had a couple African American friends, right? I think in high school I had more Caucasian friends. It's just who I felt more comfortable with in many ways, right? I felt less comfortable with Latino, only because I think this is my experience has been more socioeconomic and education, right? So sadly I wasn't hanging out with kids that weren't taking Shakespeare class. I was taking that class, right? And so it just happened that way, and I couldn't relate in that manner. But there's other kids that I did hang out with that were in shop class or something like that. So it just all depended. It depended on who I hung out with. But didn't hang out with the drug dealers. I didn't hang out with those kind of guys. I knew who they were, right? I didn't hang out with those guys. Didn't hang out with too many athletes, right? Even though I did play some sports, right? So, yeah.
You still surf?
Yeah, I still surf, yeah. So in many ways, I felt as an outsider, if I look back, I probably hung out with outsiders more, right? Because I think outsiders have an interesting perspective in culture and seeing how things really work, how they fit in.